5 things that make older men seem creepy to women. Love is not about possession. Love is about appreciation. Osho, let's tell the truth without dressing it up. Some older men walk into a room and create calm without trying. Women relax around them. They feel heard, respected, and safe. There is no performance, no pressure, just a steady kind of presence that makes conversation feel natural and easy. But other men create the opposite effect almost instantly. The room feels tighter. The energy feels off. A woman may not always explain it in words, but she feels the need to step back, shorten the conversation, or leave altogether. And the hard part is this: many of those men do not realize what they are doing wrong. That is exactly why this conversation matters. Any man who cares about dignity, real connection, and how he carries himself in the world needs to pay attention to these signals. This is not about shame. It is not about labeling a man as good or bad. It is about awareness. Because the habits that make a man seem unsettling are usually learned behaviors, not permanent traits. And what is learned can be corrected. A man with honesty and self-respect can change his energy, clean up his presence, and become someone people genuinely feel comfortable around. So let's look closely at 5 things that can make older men seem creepy to women, and more importantly, how to avoid them with maturity and grace. First thing, outcome dependence when your inner peace is in her hands. There's a quiet truth most men don't confront, but it shapes every interaction they have. When your inner peace depends on how a woman responds to you, you stop being grounded, and you start feeling off in ways you don't even notice. That is the first thing that can make an older man come across as unsettling without ever intending to. It's called outcome dependence, and it shows up in subtle, almost invisible behaviors. Not loud, not obvious, but powerful. You see it in the way a man leans in just a little too long, hoping she'll validate his presence. You hear it in the extra compliments that feel less like appreciation and more like a quiet request for approval. You feel it in the shift of energy when she doesn't react the way he expected. His smile tightens, his confidence dips, his presence becomes uncertain. Don't ignore this. That is the moment everything changes. Because what's really happening underneath is simple and dangerous. He is tying his sense of worth to her reaction. If she smiles, he feels successful. If she seems distant, he feels rejected. And just like that, without saying a word, he places the weight of his identity in her hands. That is too much pressure for any interaction, and women feel it instantly. Not always consciously, but emotionally, instinctively, they feel the imbalance. And it creates discomfort. It breaks the natural flow. It turns what should be a light, human connection into something that feels like a test he needs to pass. Don't do that. Be aware of that shift. Because this has nothing to do with age, it has everything to do with presence. Life experience can either refine a man or quietly harden his need for validation. Years of loneliness, divorce, or emotional distance can create a hunger for connection that feels urgent. But urgency, when it leaks into your behavior, does not attract, it repels. You must understand this clearly. A high-value man does not seek validation in the moment. He carries his value with him. He doesn't need a reaction to feel complete. That is the difference. That is what separates a man who feels calm, grounded, and magnetic from one who feels tense, uncertain, and uncomfortable to be around. And here's where it gets even more important. This isn't about pretending not to care. Don't misunderstand that. Connection matters. Desire is human. Wanting to be seen and appreciated is natural. But the problem begins when you make her response the condition for your peace. When you're constantly scanning the interaction, asking yourself, is this working? Does she like me? Am I saying the right thing? You are no longer present. You are performing. And people can feel that. Be present instead. Stay grounded in yourself. Enjoy the conversation for what it is, not for what it could become. That is how to fall in love with the moment, not just the outcome. That is how to fall in love with the process of connection itself. Because a man who can talk, smile, engage, and then walk away just as centered, just as calm, regardless of the result, that man creates a completely different emotional experience. There is no pressure around him, no hidden agenda, no silent neediness. And that ease, that quiet confidence, is what makes him stand out. It's what makes people feel safe. It's what makes attraction grow naturally instead of being forced. So ask yourself something honest, something that requires real self awareness. Are you actually present in your interactions, or are you constantly measuring, adjusting, hoping, and waiting for a sign that you're being accepted? That question alone can change your entire approach. Because the moment you shift from outcome to presence, everything transforms. Your body language relaxes. Your tone becomes steady. Your words become more natural. And most importantly, your energy becomes self contained. That is the energy of a high value man. Not perfect, not rehearsed, but grounded, calm, unshaken by small reactions. And when you live from that place, you stop chasing validation and you start creating real connection. That is where attraction begins. That is how to fall in love with life, not just with a result. And that is how to fall in love in a way that feels real, balanced, and deeply human. Second thing, living in the past and expecting credit for it. This one doesn't shout, it whispers. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. It shows up in small, almost invisible habits, bringing up old victories a little too often, reminding people of what you built, what you earned, where you've been, who you used to be. It can even hide behind silence, in that quiet expectation that respect should be given automatically, just because of age. But here's the hard truth. The world doesn't run on memory. Attraction doesn't run on history. A woman is not sitting there flipping through your resume like a hiring manager. She's not interviewing your past. She's experiencing you right now, in real time, in the present moment. And that changes everything. Because the moment a man leans too heavily on his past, the energy shifts. What he thinks is impressive starts to feel like a request. What he believes is proof of value starts to sound like a subtle plea. See me. Acknowledge me. Validate me. And that is where attraction quietly disappears. Not because his past has no value, but because he's asking it to carry a weight it was never meant to carry. Your past is a foundation. It is not your identity in motion. It cannot speak for you today. It cannot replace presence. It cannot replace connection. Don't misunderstand this. Your experiences matter. Your story matters. The things you've built, the struggles you've overcome, the lessons you've learned, they are all real and they all have weight. But they only have power when they are integrated into who you are now, not when they are used as a performance. That is the difference. That is what most men miss. They think sharing their past will create admiration, but admiration without connection feels distant. And distance is the opposite of attraction. Be present. That is the instruction. The men who truly age well understand this deeply. They don't try to impress. They don't perform. They don't walk into a conversation carrying the burden of proving their worth. They walk in light, curious, engaged, interested. They ask questions not out of strategy, not as some rehearsed move from a list of psychology tricks, but because they genuinely want to understand the person in front of them. And ironically, that is what makes them stand out. That is what makes them magnetic. In female psychology, presence always beats performance. Always. A man in his 50s or 60s who listens, really listens, is rare. A man who doesn't interrupt, who doesn't steer every conversation back to himself, who doesn't feel the need to dominate the space just to feel secure, that man creates something most others cannot: emotional ease. And emotional ease is deeply attractive. It signals strength without force, confidence without noise, value without announcement. Don't talk more. Listen better. That is where the shift begins. Because when you stop trying to prove who you were, you create space to become fully who you are. And that version of you, calm, grounded, attentive, that version doesn't need validation. He doesn't need to remind anyone of his achievements. His presence speaks. His attention speaks. His stillness speaks. And in a world where so many are trying to be seen, the man who truly sees others becomes unforgettable. This is not about playing games. This is not about mastering some hidden psychology tricks to manipulate outcomes. It's about understanding something deeper within female psychology. People are drawn to how you make them feel, not what you tell them about yourself. If your presence feels like a performance, they feel pressure. If your presence feels like curiosity, they feel safe. And safety opens the door to connection. Be curious, not performative. Ask thoughtful questions, not predictable ones. Don't ask just to reply, ask to understand. And when she speaks, don't wait for your turn. Don't search for an opportunity to bring the focus back to your story. Stay there. Stay with her words. Stay with her energy. That is where connection lives. And here's the paradox. The less you try to impress, the more impressive you become. Because true confidence is quiet. It doesn't rush. It doesn't chase approval. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists. And that kind of presence is rare, especially in men who have lived long enough to accumulate stories, titles, achievements, and experiences. Most feel the need to use those things as currency. But the ones who don't, the ones who can sit comfortably in the present without leaning on the past, those are the ones who feel different. They feel grounded, real, easy to be around. That is what you must become. Stop performing your past. Stop leading with what you've done. Stop expecting credit for things that no longer exist in this moment. Your past is behind you. It shaped you, yes, but it does not define how others experience you today. Start living your present. Be the man who is fully there, fully engaged, fully aware. The man who doesn't need to prove anything because he already knows who he is. And that quiet certainty, that is what draws people in. That is what makes a woman lean closer instead of pulling away. That is the shift. Third thing, emotional dysregulation, the one that makes women feel unsafe. Any man can lose his temper, but it takes strength to remain calm when it matters most. That idea, often attributed to thinkers like Aristotle, cuts straight to the heart of what we're talking about here. Emotional dysregulation is not just a minor flaw. It is the silent signal that makes people step back without saying a word. It is the tension in the air that nobody can quite explain, but everyone can feel. And if you are a man who wants to attract women and move through life with quiet confidence, you cannot afford to ignore it. You must understand it. You must master it. Here is the truth. When frustration escalates too fast, when rejection leads to sudden withdrawal, when intensity shows up too early, or when irritation turns into visible anger without warning, the message being sent is simple and undeniable. You are not in control of yourself. That is the message. Not your words, not your intentions. Your emotional reactions speak louder than anything you say, and people listen to that signal instantly, especially women, especially in today's world, where awareness of emotional safety is higher than ever. You may think you are just being honest or expressing yourself, but what is received is unpredictability. And unpredictability never attracts. It repels. Do not misunderstand this. The goal is not to suppress your emotions. Suppression creates pressure, and pressure eventually breaks. That is not strength. That is delay. The real goal is control. Control means you feel everything, but you choose what happens next. You pause. You breathe. You decide. That space between stimulus and response, that is where masculine energy is built. That is where respect is earned. That is where you separate yourself from the majority of men who react without thinking. In modern life, emotional triggers are everywhere. Text messages that don't get replies, conversations that don't go your way, subtle rejection, misunderstandings, delays, disappointments. These moments are constant. They are unavoidable, but your reaction is always a choice. Always. You must train yourself to see these moments not as threats, but as tests. Tests of your composure, tests of your discipline, tests of your ability to remain grounded when things do not go as expected. Think about this carefully. A man who reacts instantly is controlled by the moment. A man who pauses controls the moment. That is the difference. That is the edge. That is what allows a man to attract women without chasing, without forcing, without performing. Because when you are steady, when you are calm, when your emotional state does not swing wildly based on external events, people feel it. They trust it. They relax around it. And that feeling, calm, grounded presence, is far more powerful than any clever words or surface level charm. You must also understand timing. Intensity too early is a mistake many men make. They feel something strong, and they express it immediately without considering whether the connection has earned that level of emotion. This creates imbalance. It creates pressure. It creates discomfort. Do not rush emotional depth. Let it build. Let it develop naturally. Control the pace. That is part of masculine energy. Not rushing, not forcing, not overwhelming, but allowing things to unfold with patience and awareness. And when rejection happens, and it will, you must handle it with composure. Do not withdraw in a way that feels cold or resentful. Do not react with visible frustration. Do not let your ego take control. Instead, remain steady. Acknowledge it. Accept it. Move forward. This is where most men fail. They take rejection personally. They let it disrupt their emotional state. But a man who truly understands how to attract women knows that rejection is part of the process, not a reflection of his worth. He stays grounded. He stays respectful. He stays in control. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That is not just philosophy. That is instruction. That is a rule to live by. You cannot control how others respond to you. You cannot control outcomes. But you can always control your reaction. Always. And that control is what creates stability. That stability is what creates trust. And trust is what creates attraction. Let's make this practical. When you feel irritation rising, slow down your response. When you feel the urge to react immediately, delay it. When your emotions spike, lower your voice, not raise it. When something doesn't go your way, maintain your posture, your tone, your composure. These are small actions, but they build a powerful image over time. They show discipline. They show self-mastery. They show that you are not easily shaken. And that is what people respect. Do not aim to be emotionless. That is not the goal. Aim to be emotionally disciplined. There is a difference. One disconnects you from life. The other gives you control over it. Feel deeply, care deeply, but never lose yourself in the moment. Never let your emotions dictate your behavior without your permission. You are in charge. You must be in charge. Because at the end of the day, a man who is calm under pressure, who can experience emotion without being overwhelmed by it, who can navigate discomfort without reacting impulsively, that man stands out. That man commands quiet respect. That man naturally attracts women without trying to impress. Not because he is perfect, but because he is controlled, grounded, predictable in the best way. And that is the standard you must hold yourself to. Not perfection, but control. Not suppression, but mastery. Not performance, but presence. Be steady. Be composed. Be deliberate. That is how you win. Fourth thing, inability to read the room and unwillingness to adjust. Fourth thing, the inability to read the room and, even worse, the refusal to adjust when the message is already clear. This is where many men quietly lose respect without ever realizing why. Because reading the room is not about intelligence, it's about awareness. It's about noticing the subtle shifts that most people ignore. The slight pause in her responses, the way her body angles away, the shorter answers, the polite smile that replaces genuine engagement. That is the room speaking to you. And if you miss it or choose to override it, everything changes. Don't ignore those signals. Don't explain them away. Don't convince yourself that persistence will somehow turn discomfort into attraction. It won't. It never does. That is not how to fall in love. That is how to create distance without even understanding why. A man who understands how to fall in love understands timing. He understands energy. He understands that attraction is not built by pushing harder, but by knowing when to lean back. That is the difference. Because the uncomfortable version of this situation is painfully easy to recognize. The man who keeps going when the moment has already passed. He adds more compliments when she's already pulling away. He steps closer when she subtly creates space. He continues talking when she has emotionally checked out. And the tragedy is, sometimes he genuinely doesn't see it. But other times, he does see it and he ignores it. Why? Because stopping would mean facing rejection. And many men would rather push through discomfort than accept a simple truth. But here is the reality you must accept: rejection is not your enemy. Misreading reality is. A high value man does not fear rejection because he does not tie his identity to one interaction. He does not need every moment to work in his favor. He does not chase validation. He observes. He adjusts. He moves with awareness. That is power. That is control. And most importantly, that is calm. Because when a man is calm, he becomes easy to be around. When he becomes easy to be around, he becomes memorable in the right way. Don't force energy where it's not flowing. Be the man who notices. Be the man who respects unspoken boundaries. Be the man who can step back without turning it into a dramatic moment. That is where real confidence lives. Not in persistence for the sake of ego, but in restraint for the sake of clarity. Because here's the truth most men overlook: knowing when to stop is more attractive than knowing what to say. That is how to fall in love in a way that feels natural, not forced. That is how a high value man separates himself without ever needing to prove it. Think about it. The moment a woman feels like she has to manage your behavior, the dynamic shifts. She's no longer relaxed. She's evaluating how to exit. And once that happens, the opportunity is already gone. So don't put her in that position. Don't make her carry that weight. Instead, read the moment early. Adjust early. Exit early if needed. And do it with quiet confidence. No frustration. No awkwardness. No need for explanation. Just a simple shift of energy. That alone speaks volumes about who you are. Because a high-value man understands something most never learn: attraction grows in space, not pressure. When you give space, you show control. When you show control, you create comfort. And comfort is the foundation of genuine connection. This is not about playing games. This is about emotional intelligence. It's about being tuned in enough to recognize reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. That is how to fall in love in a way that actually works in modern life, where people are constantly reading each other beneath the surface. So remember this clearly. Don't chase moments that are already fading. Don't stretch conversations that have naturally ended. Don't insist when the energy says step back. Instead, do the opposite. Be aware. Be adaptive. Be grounded. That is the man people feel safe around. That is the man who leaves a positive impression even when nothing happens. And ironically, that is the man who often gets another chance because he knew when not to push. Fifth thing: lack of boundaries, trying too hard to be liked instead of being respected. This one is subtle, but it quietly erodes everything. Because when a man has no clear boundaries, his energy becomes scattered, unfocused, uncertain. He laughs too quickly at things he doesn't find funny. He agrees too easily just to keep the conversation smooth. He overextends himself, gives too much attention too early, and slowly loses his center in the process. Don't do that. Don't trade your self-respect for temporary approval. That is not how to fall in love. That is how to lose yourself before anything real even begins. A high-value man does not bend himself into whatever shape he thinks will be accepted. He stands as he is, calm, respectful, but grounded in his own standards. That is the difference. Because people don't feel safe around someone who has no edges. They feel confused. They feel the imbalance. And over time, that confusion turns into disinterest. Be clear about what you like. Be clear about what you don't. That is not arrogance. That is identity. And identity is attractive because it creates certainty. When you know where you stand, others know how to meet you. But when you constantly adjust yourself to fit the moment, you lose that clarity. You become unpredictable in the wrong way, not emotionally explosive, but structurally unstable. And that kind of instability quietly pushes people away, especially women who are looking, whether consciously or not, for a man who feels anchored, a man who knows himself, a man who can say no without tension and yes without hesitation. That is presence. That is maturity. That is how to fall in love in a way that feels balanced, not one sided. Don't confuse kindness with overgiving. Don't confuse interest with overinvestment. Don't confuse politeness with self erasure. Be warm, yes. Be respectful always. But be rooted. Because a high value man gives from abundance, not from need. He doesn't try to earn his place in the interaction by overcompensating. He assumes his place through how he carries himself, through how he listens, through how he speaks, through what he tolerates and what he doesn't. That last part matters more than most men realize. What you tolerate teaches people how to treat you. If you tolerate disrespect, confusion, or one-sided effort, you silently approve it. And once that pattern begins, it's hard to reverse. So set the tone early, not with force, not with confrontation, but with consistency. If something feels off, don't ignore it just to keep things going. If something doesn't align with you, don't smile through it just to be liked. That small moment of honesty builds long-term respect. And respect is always the foundation of attraction. Always. Because without respect, any connection feels fragile, temporary, replaceable. But when respect is present, everything else has space to grow naturally. That is how to fall in love without losing your center. And here's the quiet truth most men overlook. Boundaries don't push people away. They filter the right people in. They create clarity. They create balance. They create a dynamic where both sides show up as themselves, not as versions trying to impress or accommodate. That is where real connection lives. That is where ease begins. And that is why a high-value man never abandons his standards just to keep a moment alive. He would rather walk away with dignity than stay in a dynamic that costs him his self-respect. So remember this clearly. Don't chase approval. Don't overextend. Don't dilute who you are just to be accepted. Be steady. Be clear. Be grounded in your own values. That is the man people trust. That is the man people respect. And in the long run, that is the man people are drawn to without him ever needing to try too hard. So those are the 4 things: outcome dependence, living in the past, emotional dysregulation, and failing to read the room. And let's make one thing clear right now: none of these patterns have to become your identity. Don't turn a bad habit into a life sentence. Don't confuse self-awareness with self-condemnation. These are not permanent flaws carved into stone. They're patterns, learned patterns, repeated patterns. And anything repeated can be interrupted, reshaped, and replaced. That is the good news. That is the grown man advantage. A younger man may still be stumbling through himself without knowing it, but an older man has something far more valuable if he chooses to use it: reflection, perspective, and the ability to change with intention. The men who become more compelling with age are not the ones trying to prove they still have it. They are the ones who stop performing and start understanding. They become calmer, sharper, more grounded, more at ease. That ease matters. Women feel it. People feel it. Life responds to it. A high-value man is not built from noise, pressure, or old stories about who he used to be. He is built from presence, from discipline, from emotional steadiness, from the quiet confidence of a man who no longer needs every room to approve of him. That is what makes someone magnetic over time. Not perfection, not slick words, not forced charm. Awareness. Honest awareness. The kind that lets a man sit with himself and say, yes, this is where I get too attached to an outcome. Yes, this is where I rely too much on the past. Yes, this is where my emotions start driving the car. Yes, this is where I miss signals and keep going too long. That kind of honesty is rare, and rare is attractive. Because the truth is simple: attraction and respect are never things you can demand. You cannot corner them. You cannot pressure them. You cannot pull them out of another person by trying harder. You earn them. Slowly, naturally, quietly. You earn them by becoming a man who feels at home within himself. That phrase matters. At home within himself. It means you are not constantly reaching outside yourself for proof that you matter. It means you are not begging the moment to save your self-worth. It means you can enjoy connection without trying to squeeze certainty out of it. That is maturity. That is strength. That is how to fall in love in a healthy way, because how to fall in love is not just about finding the right person. It is about becoming the kind of person who can love without clinging, without performing, without making every interaction feel heavy. A high value man understands that. He does not chase chemistry like a starving man chasing crumbs. He brings steadiness to the table. He brings warmth without pressure. He brings interest without desperation. He brings self respect without arrogance. And in modern life, where so many people are tired of games, tired of instability, tired of mixed signals and emotional chaos, that kind of grounded energy stands out immediately. Don't miss that point. The work is not about becoming someone fake. Be real, but be refined. Be honest, but be measured. Be open, but be centered. You must understand that growing older does not automatically make a man wiser. Reflecting on himself does. Time alone does nothing. Time with awareness changes everything. So if you see yourself in any of these patterns, good. That means you can do something about them. That means you are awake enough to improve. That means the story is still being written. Don't retreat into shame. Don't hide behind excuses. Don't tell yourself, that's just how I am. Be better than that. Be wiser than that. Be willing to do the internal work that so many avoid. Because that work pays off everywhere, in your relationships, in your confidence, in your peace of mind, in the way people experience your presence. And yes, it even changes how to fall in love, because when a man becomes more secure within himself, love stops feeling like a battlefield and starts feeling like a bond. It stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like peace. So remember the lesson. The goal is not to be flawless. The goal is to be aware, coachable, grounded, and deeply responsible for your own energy. That is the work. That has always been the work. And it is always worth doing. Because the man who does that work does not just become more attractive. He becomes freer. He becomes steadier. He becomes the kind of man other people trust, respect, and remember. In the deepest sense, that is the true mark of a high-value man. And if you stay with that idea, if you really sit with it and let it shape how you move through your days, something begins to shift quietly but powerfully. You stop chasing moments and you start choosing them. You stop reacting to everything and you start responding with intention. That is the transition. That is where a man stops being pulled by life and starts standing firmly within it. Because the truth is, most men never slow down enough to examine themselves. They stay busy, distracted, entertained. But growth does not happen in noise. It happens in reflection. It happens in those honest moments when you ask yourself, where am I still operating from fear? Where am I still seeking approval? Where am I still avoiding discomfort? Those questions are not easy, but they're necessary. And a high-value man does not run from necessary work. He leans into it. He respects it. He understands that every uncomfortable truth he faces today becomes strength tomorrow. Don't rush this process. Don't treat it like a quick fix. Be patient with your growth, but be serious about it. That is the balance. Because real change is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is subtle. It shows up in how you pause before speaking, in how you no longer feel the need to fill every silence, in how you let a conversation end naturally without forcing it to continue, in how you accept rejection without turning it into a story about your worth. These are small shifts, but they compound. They build a presence that people feel without you ever needing to explain it. That is power in its most refined form. A high-value man understands that his energy speaks before his words ever do. The way he walks into a room, the way he listens, the way he holds eye contact without intensity, without pressure, just calm awareness. These details matter. They always have. And in a world where so many are trying to be louder, faster, more impressive, the man who is steady stands out without trying. That is the paradox. The less you try to force attraction, the more naturally it begins to appear. Not because you learned a new line or a new strategy, but because you removed the behaviors that were blocking it in the first place. So don't ask, how can I impress her? Ask, how can I show up as my most grounded self? That question changes everything. Because how to fall in love is not about creating a perfect moment. It is about creating a real one. a moment where there is no pressure to perform, no hidden agenda, no need to prove. Just two people sharing space, sharing energy, and allowing something natural to unfold. That is rare. And rarity creates value. You must also learn to detach from immediate results. This is where most men struggle. They want confirmation now. They want clarity now. They want to know right away if it's working. But life does not operate on that timeline. Connection takes time. Trust takes time. Attraction builds in layers. And when you rush it, you collapse the very thing you are trying to create. So slow down. Let things breathe. Let silence exist without trying to fix it. Let curiosity lead instead of expectation. That is how to fall in love in a way that feels effortless, not forced. And remember this, every interaction is not meant to lead somewhere. Some conversations are just conversations. Some connections are just moments. And that is okay. In fact, that is healthy. Because when you stop needing every interaction to turn into something more, you free yourself. You become lighter, more relaxed, more enjoyable to be around. And ironically, that is when deeper connections begin to happen. Because there is no pressure attached to you, no hidden demand, just presence. A high-value man carries that mindset into every part of his life, not just with women, with friends, with family, with work. He does not cling. He does not force. He does not overreact. He moves with clarity, with patience, with control. And that consistency builds trust over time. People begin to see him as reliable, grounded, easy to be around. And those qualities, quiet as they may seem, are what create lasting attraction. Not the surface-level excitement that fades, but the deeper kind that grows. So keep doing the work, even when no one sees it, even when there is no immediate reward, because the real reward is internal. It is the feeling of being centered within yourself, the feeling of not needing external validation to feel complete, the feeling of knowing that no matter how someone responds to you, you remain steady. That is freedom. And freedom is attractive in a way that cannot be faked. Don't go back to old habits just because they are familiar. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that comfort equals growth. It doesn't. Growth often feels uncomfortable. It requires you to let go of patterns that once protected you but no longer serve you. It requires you to step into a version of yourself that feels unfamiliar at first. But stay with it. Trust the process. Because over time, that new version becomes natural. It becomes who you are. And when that happens, everything changes. Your conversations feel easier. Your presence feels lighter. Your confidence feels real, not something you have to maintain, but something that exists naturally. That is the evolution. That is the transformation. Not from one tactic to another, but from one way of being to another. So take this seriously. Not with pressure, but with purpose. Be the man who reflects. Be the man who adjusts. Be the man who grows. Because at the end of the day, how to fall in love is not just about finding the right person. It is about becoming the kind of man who can receive love without fear, give love without conditions, and walk away from what is not right without losing himself. That is strength. That is clarity. That is peace. And that is what makes a man truly unforgettable. And if you keep walking down this path, if you keep choosing awareness over ego, presence over performance, discipline over impulse, you begin to notice something profound. Life stops feeling like something you need to control and starts feeling like something you can move through with quiet confidence. That shift alone changes everything. Because most men are trying to manage outcomes. They're trying to predict reactions. They're trying to secure certainty in a world that simply doesn't offer it. But a high-value man understands something deeper. Certainty is not found in outcomes. It is built within. And once you build that internal certainty, you no longer need the outside world to constantly reassure you that you're on the right path. You feel it. You carry it. You trust it. Don't underestimate how powerful that is. Because when you trust yourself, your energy changes. Your words slow down. Your movements become more deliberate. Your presence becomes more grounded. You stop rushing to fill silence. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to win interactions. Instead, you experience them fully, calmly, without needing them to become anything more than they are. And that is where real connection begins, not in effort, but in ease. Think about how rare that is today. People are constantly distracted, constantly checking, constantly reacting. Very few people are actually present. So when you become the man who is truly there, focused, attentive, emotionally steady, you stand out immediately. Not because you are trying to stand out, but because your presence feels different. It feels intentional. It feels grounded. And in a world full of noise, grounded energy is magnetic. This is where the deeper work begins. Because once you remove the obvious mistakes, outcome dependence, living in the past, emotional instability, and failing to read the room, you are left with something more subtle, more refined, the mastery of self. Not control in a rigid sense, but alignment. Alignment between your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. When those three are in sync, you become powerful in a way that doesn't need to be announced. People feel it. They respond to it. They trust it. A high-value man does not chase attention. He attracts it through consistency, through the way he shows up day after day without needing validation. And this consistency is built in private. It's built in the small choices no one sees. Waking up and choosing discipline over comfort. Choosing reflection over distraction. Choosing growth over excuses. These moments don't look impressive from the outside, but they shape everything on the inside. And over time, that internal structure becomes visible in your external presence. Don't look for shortcuts here. There are none that last. You can learn techniques. You can memorize lines. You can study strategies. But none of that replaces the work of becoming a man who is genuinely comfortable within himself. Because people can feel the difference. They can feel when something is practiced versus when it is natural. And natural always wins. So ask yourself better questions. Not, how do I get her to like me, but am I someone who is easy to like when I'm fully myself? Not, what should I say next, but am I actually listening right now? Not, how do I avoid rejection, but can I remain steady regardless of the outcome? These questions shift your focus from external control to internal development. And that is where real power lies. Because the truth is, you cannot control how someone feels about you. You cannot control timing. You cannot control chemistry. But you can control how you show up. You can control your presence, your reactions, your energy. And when you master those things, you stop trying to manipulate outcomes and start allowing the right ones to unfold naturally. That is the difference between forcing and attracting. And here's something most men never fully understand. Attraction is not built in moments of intensity. It is built in moments of consistency. It's not about one perfect conversation. It's about the overall experience of being around you. Do you feel steady? Do you feel calm? Do you feel real? These are the questions people answer subconsciously every time they interact with you. And those answers determine everything. So don't aim to impress in one moment. Aim to be consistent across many. That is how trust is built. That is how attraction deepens. That is how connection becomes something meaningful instead of something temporary. And this applies to every area of your life, not just relationships. Your work, your friendships, your habits. Everything reflects the same principle, consistency over intensity. Be patient with that process, because patience is a form of confidence. It shows that you are not desperate for immediate results. It shows that you trust your path. And that kind of patience is rare. It signals strength. It signals stability. It signals that you are not easily shaken by temporary outcomes. Now, let's go even deeper. Because at some point, this journey becomes less about fixing behaviors and more about understanding yourself at a fundamental level. Why do you seek validation? Why does rejection affect you the way it does? Why do certain situations trigger emotional reactions? These are not surface-level questions. They require honesty. They require introspection. And most importantly, they require you to sit with discomfort instead of avoiding it. But that is where transformation happens. Not in comfort, not in distraction, but in those moments where you face yourself without filters, without excuses, without narratives, just truth. And the more you do that, the less control your past has over you, the less reactive you become, the more intentional your life feels. A high-value man is not someone who has eliminated all flaws. He is someone who understands them, manages them, and does not let them define his behavior. That is maturity. That is growth. That is what separates a man who evolves from one who stays stuck in the same patterns for decades. So don't rush to become perfect. That's not the goal. The goal is to become aware, then consistent, then refined. It's a process. And like any process, it takes time. But the results are undeniable. Because as you grow, your relationships improve. Your confidence stabilizes. Your sense of self becomes clearer. And life begins to feel less chaotic and more intentional. And here's where it all comes together. When you become grounded within yourself, love changes. It stops feeling like something you need to chase. It stops feeling like something that can be taken from you at any moment. Instead, it becomes something you can share freely, without fear, without pressure, without losing yourself in the process. That is how to fall in love in a way that is sustainable, not driven by urgency, not driven by insecurity, but driven by clarity and connection. And when you reach that point, you no longer enter relationships hoping to be completed. You enter them already whole. And that changes everything. Because two people who are whole create something very different than two people who are trying to fill gaps within themselves. One creates stability, the other creates tension. And over time, that difference becomes impossible to ignore. So stay committed to the work, even when it feels slow, even when it feels repetitive, even when you don't see immediate results. Because the real results are internal at first. They show up in your mindset, in your reactions, in your sense of calm. And eventually, they show up in your life, in the people you attract, in the quality of your relationships, in the respect you receive. Don't look back and wish you had started earlier. Start now. Don't compare your journey to anyone else's. Focus on your own growth. Because at the end of the day, this is not a competition. It's a process of becoming more aware, more grounded, more intentional. And when you stay on that path long enough, something powerful happens. You stop trying to be a high-value man. You simply become one, naturally, effortlessly, without needing to prove it, without needing to announce it, because it shows in everything you do. That is the destination. Not perfection, not validation, but alignment, peace, strength, and a quiet confidence that cannot be shaken by temporary outcomes. And once you have that, everything else becomes a bonus.